You are listening to Fast Track Podcast, the place to be to fast track your personal finance or fast track your business, or both, through a series of conversations with those who have learned it, done it, and made it. Andrew Henderson is the managing partner of Nomad Capitalist, the most sought-after expert on global citizenship. He lives by 5 magic words: go where you are treated best. Nomad Capitalist helps people to find the best places to live, bank, invest, incorporate, start a business, hire, date, and more. After nearly a dozen years living and visiting in more than 100 countries, Andrew has become the expert on the growing field of global citizenship. He's the author of Nomad Capitalist, a book discussing the concepts of global citizenship that anyone can apply. In this episode, he shared with us his personal experiences and views on being a global citizen, the benefits of obtaining second passports, and how most people can create a plan B. Hello, Andrew. Welcome to the Fast Track Podcast.
Great to be with you. Thank you for the invite.
And I have known you, from the internet for about 10 years. But for our audience, some of them might not have heard about Nomad Capitalist. So maybe could you tell us a little bit about Nomad Capitalist and yourself?
Well, I think Nomad Capitalist, in one sense, I think of it kind of like America, right? It's an idea, and it's something that revolves around what I call the 5 magic words: go where you are treated best. My philosophy that my father told me inadvertently when I was about 12 years old was go where you're treated best. And I've used that as an adult, as a lifelong entrepreneur, to live overseas, dramatically reduce my taxes from what I was paying in the United States, live in environments that I believe are more free, invest in economies that I believe are faster growing, be surrounded by people that better idealize and represent my values and the people that I want to be with. And so what we've done over the years is started with, as you said, a blog and a YouTube channel. We've created over 3,000 pieces of content over the years, videos and articles, which have then been turned into podcasts and all that. So lots of free content about my experiences of 13 years traveling around the world, coming up on close to a decade of living full-time out of the United States, and what that's all about: getting multiple citizenships, how to lower your taxes, how to bank overseas, how to invest in other countries. And it's become a business. So ultimately, beyond an idea, it's also something that we have turned into, due to demand from the marketplace, a business where we work with high-level entrepreneurs and investors to accomplish those goals. And so it is something that is very much who I am and what we do.
I see. I was about to ask you how and why did you start Nomad Capitalist? So from your story, I understand that it's from demand from the market. Like people see what you do, or they ask you how you do it?
Well, I was an entrepreneur in the United States since I was 19 years old. I was knocking on doors, selling things. I created my own magazine. I sold stuff for my school. At one point, I helped my parents sell their home by creating a website back before there were real estate websites. And so I've always been interested in selling things and marketing things and being an entrepreneur. And I've done that ever since I dropped out of university at 19 years old. And so, as a child libertarian who believed in lower taxes, it was all very theoretical. And so, there's a difference between saying, hey, taxes are too high when you're 15 sitting in your room, and being 22 and you just get a big tax bill because it's your first big year, you're making 6 figures, and it hurts. And now you've got to actually pay real money. And so it was about that time, maybe a year later, that I really started to travel a lot around the world and notice that things were different in different countries. And my father's words, go where you're treated best, came back to me. And so when I finally sold my last US business, I left the US for good. I had been traveling a majority of the time before that, but I left the US for good. And I started writing on this blog called Nomad Capitalist. I came up with it with the idea of potentially being a media creature and, being the guy that would be on CNBC whenever they had a segment about investing in Laos. Not that you can do that really, but, in publishing this information and publishing, hey, I'm getting a passport, or hey, this, or hey, that, people just called because there was nobody who was being authentic. You had this entire kind of monkey see, monkey do movement of guys with fake names using stock photos who were writing about this stuff it spoke to what the offshore world was, which is a bunch of people who want to like hide out. Maybe there's some shadiness to it in some cases. And I said, I want to bring this business out of the shadows because I realized there were so many legitimate entrepreneurs like myself who just wanted to go where they're treated best. They didn't like the stigma of going overseas to lower their taxes, but they did like the idea. And so it's developed over the years. Each year seems better than the last. And that's why we did it. It was the one business that I never realized exactly that it would take off the way it did. And I think perhaps that's why it did take off.
And in the last 10 years, how was your journey like? What has changed?
Well, I mean, when I first made this realization, I was in my early 20s, and it's interesting now to go back and look at some of these people, not to pick on anybody, but I look at some of these people who, bought Bitcoin, at very low prices, and now Bitcoin's going crazy. I think that's fantastic. And I have a lot of respect for people who are visionaries. I also think that what you have to be careful of is this kind of nouveau riche, like snarkiness, like everything. And I think what I've learned is just how much I don't know, as anyone does, hopefully, as they mature. But what I've seen is, I've learned more about how this offshore world really works. And, if you live in the United States, you can find out the value of your house in 5 minutes by going online. You can have things delivered to your house that day. Yeah. There's so many things that you're used to that don't exist out here in the rest of the world. And I think that for me, it's been learning what are the good things about the US. There are some good things. It's a very consumer oriented, convenient culture. I think that kind of works against people in a certain way. But there are certain things that are good about the US. Service is good. But I've also realized that the US is by far where I'm from, and I think a lot of similar countries that people generally compare it to when they say there's nowhere else to go, the UK, Australia, et cetera, those countries really don't measure up. And I've seen that to where now it's just part of my everyday life. I think that initially when people leave the US, sometimes it's out of a certain anger. They're running from something rather than towards something. And I've learned that you want to run towards something. And I've learned just how different so many places are, but also how you can adapt to that and be very successful. And so there's a great fear of leaving the country, and people project that in many different ways. They project it by saying there's nowhere else to go. And I found that that's simply not true.
Right. And also, according to your motto, is go where you're treated best. So presumably there are a lot of possibilities for people to go, but a lot of people are not aware of that. They thought, oh, I was born in this country and then I have this passport and I need a visa, I need a permit. How can I just easily live in another country? So what would you say to those people?
Well, I think go where you're treated best can mean a number of different things. I also think it's human nature, right? We're all trying to go where we're treated best, but we all build certain walls around ourselves. And so, I was on Russian television the other day. I woke up and I found out they had done a story about us on Russian television. A lot of television in Russia is very propagandized. Russia's amazing. Everyone wants to come here. We have these terrible people coming from these poor countries nearby. They're the reason for all of our problems. Does it sound like some of the media in a place that you've heard recently? Does it sound like the UK when people were calling Polish immigrants vermin? Does it sound like the US and all the, how there's nowhere else to go and how everyone wants to come here and you're an idiot for leaving? Yeah, you know what? Poor Tajiks, poor Polish people, poor Salvadorians may want to come to your country. Doesn't mean it's a bastion for successful, wealthy people to live. And the fact is the Western world is heading in the wrong direction. And so, I've been reading the tea leaves, and I've been fortunate enough to have a father who I think was reading the tea leaves 25 years ago when he looked at and predicted that New Zealand would be a great place to go. And he did, because he had a family and he had a business, and it was harder to do business remotely back then. He decided not to do it. But he planted the seed in my head that the US would not be, by the time I am where I am now, the best place to run a business. And I think much in the same way that Russian television propaganda exists there, it also exists everywhere else. how fortunate of you to be born in the one place that's best at everything. Like, how does that really work? Really? I mean, that's how it works. It's nonsense. And I think you are seeing a lot in the last year, especially a lot of the vulnerabilities in a place like the US. People are at each other's throats. It's hard to get ahead. Taxes are high if you do get ahead. There's a lot of challenges. And meanwhile, there are 4 ex-communist countries, recently ex-communist countries, that now beat the United States in terms of free economy rankings. So your country is not winning at anything, in all likelihood. Maybe one thing, if you're in the US, it's winning at prison population per capita. That's about it. It's not winning in freedom of speech. It's not winning in freedom. It's not winning in happiness. It's not winning in free economy. It's not winning in wealth. It's not winning in bank stability. The United States, Canada, Australia, the UK do not win in any of those categories. In fact, in some cases, they don't come close. The US has the 37th best healthcare system in the world. And I think that the challenge is convincing people, which is very hard to do, and which is why 99% of people will never do this, that their country really isn't that great. That's a hard thing to tell people.
I think when we're born in certain country due to education or certain ways that you're just born with a natural pride, and then people somehow love their country no matter what. But as you said, minority might realize that why I have to be bonded to the country where I was born, right?
Here's my perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that the world is a buffet. And so look at a place that when I was born, people wouldn't have been talking about nearly as much. Singapore. Perhaps less talked about places now that have done a great job. Taiwan, South Korea. Nobody was talking about those places to the extent that they are now. I mean, when I was born in the 80s, it was Japan. They were going to take over the world, and look at that. Yeah. When I was born in the 80s, you had the Soviet Union. And now you look at countries like Georgia, which a lot of people wouldn't be talking about, quite frankly, if it weren't for Nomad Capitalist. It's the 6th easiest place in the world to start a business, because Mikhail Saakashvili, controversial guy, but he's become a great contact of ours here. He's speaking at our conference. He came in and just blew the place up and said, we're going to be a pro-business place to be. And, so things can change in a lifetime. I'm 36 years old. And so you look at a place like Singapore that no one would have talked about to the extent they do 36 years ago. It's been a great place that many people look at as a panacea. I think you're not going to see another Singapore emerge, but I think you are going to find a number of Georgias. You're going to find one place where you can start a business. You can find one place where you can hire. You're going to find one place where you can live and pay low taxes. You're going to find one place where you can, do whatever else, bank. And I think that you can, rather than trying to find one panacea, divide up your affairs: financial, where you live, where you invest, where you socialize, who you date, who you marry, who your friends are, etc. I think you can divide that up to where no one place dominates your entire life. And then, by the way, if one place does fall apart, as we're seeing Western countries, particularly the English-speaking ones, fall apart right now, if one of those places falls apart, it won't be the end of the world, because you're not fully invested in it, right? I've invested, 1 or 2% of my net worth in different projects in Cambodia. If I lose 1 or 2% of my net worth, and I think the chances of that are very, very low, then I guess so be it. But in the meantime, I've earned above average dividends. I've gotten above average capital growth. It's very, tax favorable. I'm taking a bet in a place that I think is up and coming. And I think far too many people are tied to one place. They should be diversified among 5 to 10 different places.
And in your own portfolio, I guess it's the same applies to diversification. When people invest in stock market, why not diversify based on different countries? You have real estate in 6 different countries. That's pretty well diversified.
Well, yeah, I have homes in 6 different countries because as a guy who travels a lot and does business around the world, I'm a lifetime Marriott elite. They've treated me very, very badly. I've tried staying in Airbnbs and vacation rentals, and I've stayed in too many of them. I know people say, well, I've never had that experience. I've had too many experiences where let me see if we included hot water in the description. Oh, we didn't. Sorry, no hot water. So I decided to buy properties in places that I like spending time in and that I do business in. And, I guess a lot of them have done pretty well. My property here in Colombia has gone up in value relatively nicely in the short time I've owned it, even during a pandemic. And so I've done that. Plus, I make real estate investments into things like REITs, into things like funds. I'm a partner in certain projects. I've made just kind of regular direct real estate investments. And so if you're a US citizen, for example, foreign real estate owned overseas, like my homes, is not reportable legally to the US government. You can own that and you can be diversified and have a little privacy. Very rare way to have a little bit of financial privacy as an American. And so I think that there's a benefit. Another benefit is immigration. By buying property in certain countries, you can get residence and citizenship. And I believe that in the future, being a citizen of one country means you don't have options. They want to raise your taxes. They want to impose a wealth tax. They want to impose retroactive taxes. They want to impose new regulations. If you're in crypto, for example, maybe they want to put you out of business where you live. I have so many US citizens calling me and saying, I can't invest in certain things in crypto. I'm losing a fortune in opportunity cost because I'm an American. I can't invest in certain projects. I can't do business in certain countries. Having a second passport that potentially comes from a real estate investment means you have options. And if your country decides to screw you, you just say, you know what, I'm out. You have privilege. And so, for me, real estate's about diversification. It is about higher returns. And quite frankly, I gave up my US citizenship several years ago. The US is probably, in my opinion, the most unfriendly country from a tax and paperwork standpoint for foreign investors. From an estate tax perspective, from a dividend tax perspective. So I minimize my investments in the US, even through equities, because why would I invest in a country that wants to tax me when other places like China, which has been incredible in the last year, if you've invested in China, you've done very well. I've done great in India in the last year. I've done great in Indonesia in the last year. Even in Latin America with some of the currency fluctuations, I've done very well. Why, those countries don't bother me. They just want me to invest. Why would I invest in a failing legacy brand like the United States that wants to basically rest on its laurels and make me pay the price? I don't. And so that's why I've invested in countries around the world.
And in your own opinion, what other countries do you think are up and coming for foreign investors?
I mean, I've mentioned that in my portfolio of equities and debt and things like that, I do have investments in Europe. I have investments in Latin America. I'm pretty globally diversified. I think that the Middle East is interesting as well. But in terms of pure play direct investments, countries that I've talked about, I think Colombia is certainly still suffering from a stigma that is greatly improved. It's one of the freest countries in Latin America. Bogota is the fourth largest city in the Americas. And you've got people in a medium-sized domestic economy who are moving to the capital city. And while Latin America is not perfect, I think that this country is moving in the right direction. I've long been an advocate of Cambodia as perhaps the most investable country in Asia. I've got a friend who runs a project there called Invest Asian, helping people invest there. I've talked about Georgia. I think there might be some buying opportunities, certainly a smaller domestic market, but I think the opportunities, especially for young entrepreneurs. Egypt has come onto our radar lately. I'm also looking at up and coming markets like Uzbekistan. But it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Do you have the stomach to go into Uzbekistan early? Do you have the stomach to go into some African markets? By the way, I think Istanbul also, some areas are tremendously underpriced for a city of 20 million people in a domestic economy that is growing by, tremendously. They are taking market share from Chinese products by going higher. They're taking market share from Italian and European firms by going lower. They're doing a great job. When I buy a washing machine in many parts of the world now, it's made in Turkey, and that's the value play. And I think that they've really pushed that in the last 10 years. Istanbul is a place where people are moving and they have kids, unlike most places in Europe. And so I think real estate there has been undervalued because so many people say Muslim country, and just that's their reason. I've come to be used to that. Given what I do, I talk about some far-flung places, and people project their own fear back out by having an excuse. Obviously, there are reasons you wouldn't want to invest in certain countries, but I think it really depends on how aggressive that you want to be. I think for some people, going and buying a home in Portugal, applying for the Portugal Golden Visa and getting citizenship in 6 years is a good enough diversification play. But if you're looking to maximize yields, I think that or returns, it's the countries that I've talked about, and probably then some.
I talked to some business people from Cambodia. as well, but the price has been rising so much in the past years due to foreign investors.
Oh yeah, I was in Sihanoukville, which is this nice beach area. I mean, the country you go, I go there about every year, or if not more often, and just the services available to you. I remember taking some kind of, you know, half-hearted bus down from Phnom Penh, the capital, to Sihanoukville. You could buy a condo like pretty close to the water for $15,000-$20,000 back in the early 2010s. Now they're making it the next Macau. It's just incredible. I mean, 500% returns, 600% returns. It's too late. I still think in the capital city, you've got deals. Again, my friend is doing some great deals with his fund, buying properties for under $1,000 a meter right in the middle of the city center. But to do that anymore, you have to have a Cambodian company, which he's done. You can't just go and buy as a foreigner because they've tightened things up a little bit. You can buy in a condo and pay $2,500 a meter. But I just bought property in the middle of Kuala Lumpur for my house, beautiful, ready to go property for under $1,500 a meter. So why am I paying $2,500 for a condo halfway to the airport in Cambodia? That's not the deal. The deal is the play that not everyone can get into. And I think there's still opportunities there. And if I'm 18 years old and I'm looking for a business opportunity, I'm looking for a frontier market where I can go and start a normal business.
You mentioned Kuala Lumpur. I knew that you have a lot of videos done in Kuala Lumpur, and then you have lived there for quite some time in the past.
I have spent a lot of time in Kuala Lumpur. I think it's a great home. I think Malaysia is a great place. I don't know how investable it is. I mean, I think obviously I've invested on a lifestyle basis. I think the currency, while better now against the U.S. dollar, is stronger. And I think that still there could be some upside in the long term for the currency. I mean, this is a country that wants to reach European standards by 2030, and they've done a great job in many areas of really creating a very developed country. This is a country whose passport can pretty much go everywhere except for the U.S. and Canada.
Yeah.
So I think Malaysia has been an incredible place. Do I think that it's the best place to go and get high rental yields? No, because there's been an incredible glut of foreign money coming in building condos. Look at my building. Part of the reason I got a great deal is because the bank had 7 foreclosures to buy. And so my value dipped a couple percentage points during the pandemic before it recovers. It might. I'm willing to suffer that cost to create a lifestyle property for myself as a small part of my world. But I think Malaysia is a great place to live for sure, a great place to spend time.
And then among all the countries you have visited, like more than 100, if I'm right. And which countries or country you like most?
I think there's a lot of them, right? And I think, again, everything serves a different purpose. I think within Asia, I think Malaysia is a nice value of being left alone, tax-friendly, consumer convenient, really nice people, nice weather, a little bit too nice for my taste. It's nice to have some autumn every once in a while, quite frankly. But I think Malaysia is great. I think compared to like Thailand or Singapore, I think it's for me, it's the winner. I do love Hong Kong. Hong Kong is having some interesting things going on right now. I don't think it's nearly as bad as people in the West think it is. I think Georgia is an interesting lifestyle destination. I've done an extensive office with a team in Serbia. It's about half of our global workforce. Belgrade's interesting. I think Eastern Europe is interesting. Montenegro, I've spent time on the coast. Albania, perhaps up and coming for European coast, kind of the last bastion. Colombia is nice. I think Mexico is fantastic. If I had to spend time in 3 countries for the rest of my life, I would choose somewhere in Eastern Europe, Malaysia, and Mexico.
Oh, I think I watched that video from yours. I've never been to Mexico, but I've lived in Southeast Asia for many, many years. And I like Kuala Lumpur as well. Like, people are great. Food is great. It's very international. They speak English, great weather, great facilities, much cheaper than Singapore.
Yeah, and I think, what's hard for people in the West to understand, people in the West, maybe they go to Italy on a trip, maybe they go to Ireland, right? The big question is, do people speak English? I was just in Belgrade for 3 months. English is pretty impeccable, quite frankly. It's surprising. And so, if you're a tourist from the English-speaking world, your frame of reference is probably not extending as far as some of the places that we're talking about. I'm not saying that to be judgmental, because we all start there. But I am saying that you really shouldn't judge by your Western standards. In Malaysia, I spent 6 weeks during a lockdown. and I had a home. And actually, I'm not really in favor of. I mean, I think they've shown the lockdowns don't necessarily work, but we were able to walk around. We were able to do things that a lot of people in the US aren't able to do. And I think that understanding that in certain countries, the government just isn't on top of you as much as they are in some of these places. I'm not saying that there aren't some tyrannical regimes around the world, but to say that out of 200 plus countries and territories, that you're going to make your entire frame of reference the US, the UK, Australia, Mexico, Italy, and North Korea is not fair. There's plenty of places in the middle. And I think I love Singapore. I think it's a great wealth haven and I use it. But to live, I don't want a guy, as politely as they do it, saying you can't have that bottle of water on our subway. Just not how I want to live. And if that means an occasional piece of trash on the street or an occasional chip in one of the sidewalk tiles, I accept that as kind of an adventurous part of life.
I've lived in Singapore for many, many years, and I think people are used to obeying the rules. It's just like that.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah. And there's pros and cons to, having an orderly society. Obviously, I come from the US and it's a very individualistic society. They don't understand that everywhere. But I think Malaysia has been great. It just is an example in that it's like, hey, we believe what we believe, whether it's religion. Not everyone's Muslim, by the way, Malaysia, as you know. It's about half-ish of the population, a little more. But, whether it's religion, whether it's how we live our lives, hey, we're doing our thing, you do you, and we're really not going to get on your case too much about it. Even the way that they tell you when the park closes, you need to leave. I mean, it's just a total difference from what the police or the security in a Western country would do with a heavy hand. So I think people have to understand that.
And now with your business, Nomad Capitalist, who are your main customers?
Our customers are what we call 7 and 8 figure entrepreneurs and investors. So if you make $500,000 a year or more, if you have a net worth that's the 7 figures, and I'm very happy. We got a great 5-star feedback today from a gentleman with a 9-figure net worth, right? And so we've helped people 7, 8, 9, 10 figures, and it's really been great. What I wanted to mention earlier is you don't have to do all of this stuff. What we've seen in the last year is a lot of people who want what I call a plan B. They live in the US or Egypt or Brazil, and they want to stay there, but they like the idea of becoming a dual citizen. And so they want to obtain a second citizenship by investment, where they're going to make a donation or an investment in some other country and get a citizenship quickly. Maybe they have claim to some kind of citizenship through their ancestry, parent, grandparent, great-grandparent. Maybe they're going to get what I call a paper residence, where they'll be a resident of some country by investing some money and then wait 3 or 4 years to get their citizenship. But they don't want to leave their country. And so there's many different ways to live this lifestyle. That's one of them. You can have a plan B with offshore bank accounts, offshore gold, asset protection, second citizenship, homes in other countries, and never have to leave. We also help a lot of entrepreneurs who believe that 50% tax rates are killing them, especially when some of their competitors are paying 5 and 10 in countries around the world, like Malta and Hong Kong. And so we help them legally move themselves physically to lower tax jurisdictions, set themselves up and create those plans. So, that's what it is. I think it's entrepreneurs who are sick and tired of not getting the value for what they put in. They're being called the nastiest names in their home country when they pay hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in taxes a year. Half their compatriots pay zero in the US, and they're sick of it. And it's also, investors and successful people who realize that, the West isn't what it once was. There is a change going on in the world, as there are always changes historically in the world. And being tethered to a declining empire is probably not the best idea, especially if you're a successful person.
And then what trends do you see from those 7, 8 figure entrepreneurs? What needs are they looking for nowadays?
Well, again, I think that the thing has been, I've heard so many people in the last year who said 5 years or sometimes 10 years ago, I would never have thought I'd be even thinking about this stuff, right? I come from a bit of a different perspective where this was on my radar since 12 years old. I was a very curious person. I was always interested in the world. I looked at world maps. I was studying other countries. And then my father said, hey, listen, This country seems like it's on a decline. And especially if you're going to be in business, which I knew from about 12 years old, this probably ain't the best place for you. And so I think people are now catching up to that. And they're saying, yeah, Joe Biden just got into power. He says, if you're a successful guy and you're investing in companies, or you're building a company, you're going to sell it, or if you're a crypto investor, we're going to double your capital gains tax rate. There are countries around the world. I've never seen so much press about a tax. Is all around the world. We track this. Wealth taxes are being discussed. Countries are talking about retroactive taxes, where even if you leave, they can go back and say, hey, you know what? You left a year ago, but we're going to go back 2 years and we'll tax you then. That happened in the US. And so people are just looking to be safe. They're looking to keep as much of their money as possible. Some people want to go to Dubai and pay zero. And quite frankly, you know what? Dubai has its own, they have the right to set their own tax policies, and people should be able to go there and do that. Other people want to live in Europe. They're willing to pay 5%, 10%, 12% tax, and they just want a great life in Europe. Certain places are opening up. And so, for me, countries are always changing. Portugal had a lot of problems up until the 70s, and now they're really turning it around, and they're trying to be open with tax exemptions and things like that. And so people are just trying to find the best, right? Why would you stay in the US and pay 50% tax if you could go to Portugal and pay 5%? What is it that the US has other than the propaganda, and your grandmother lives there?
And also in Switzerland, to my surprise, that the tax is, even though it's higher than in Singapore, but it's much lower than all the other countries around it. And then moving from Singapore to Switzerland, to me, it's already shocking that how much tax we pay here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the world is becoming very competitive. And so, let's be honest. If you went to a restaurant that had bad service and mediocre food, you wouldn't go back. But somehow we defend the idea that people are driving around the US. I lived in California for 6 months. You drive around some of those roads, you feel like you're on the surface of Mars. They want to take 16.5% income tax rate. That's their new goal. Whatever they're already taxing you is not enough. They want to take $1 out of every 6 just for the state, not the US, not for pension, not for Medicare, nothing, just for the state. And they want to deliver roads that you feel like you've got a flat tire. And people are in California saying, well, if you move to Dubai, you're probably going to, who knows what'll happen to you? I know what'll happen. You'll be driving on beautiful, silky smooth paved roads where people are nice, where the service is excellent. And yet California, the US, the Western world in general has become the restaurant that it's got 2.8 stars. And nobody really likes it. Maybe you go there because you're in a hurry sometimes, but you don't seek it out, and you certainly wouldn't recommend it to a friend. Nobody's going to that restaurant. No one's going to any kind of business that doesn't, deliver some kind of value. But they stay in a country where they pay and they pay and they pay. And right now in the US, you've got a lot of chaos. You've had a lot of riots. You've had protests. You've had a lot of problems. And people stay because they think there's no better. They haven't seen better. They hear stereotypes of other countries. They hear the UAE is this, or Asia is that, or Mexico is unsafe. I've spent a lot of time in Mexico. I walk around Mexico sometimes 1 a.m. I've had no problems. And there's places to go and there's places not to go. But I think it's really kind of unfair that so many people follow what they hear in the media, and they're getting ripped off in their country because they're paying and they're not getting anywhere near the value, and they wouldn't accept that from any business.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that just from the media, people have a lot of impression towards a certain country, and then they form the opinion about one country just from the media. But the media, it's one-sided story. And yeah, totally.
I mean, again, go to Russia and watch the television. Just sit in Russia. And my wife, Mrs. H, we call her. Mrs. H is from Moscow, and she talks about all the grandmothers. And I think the same is true in a lot of Eastern European countries. They sit around and they watch the TV. I was interviewed by a journalist once in one of these countries. And at the end, she said, everything we do is just propaganda. It's all nonsense. And they put it out, and older people watch. They're the ones who vote, right? And you go to Russia and you'll talk to people. They'll say that the US is collapsing. It's a third world country. No one wants to live there. Everyone's fleeing. I was just on the television 3 days ago. They were talking about me, how I renounced US citizenship. And they put some words in my mouth because of the country's falling apart basically. Now, I think the country's heading the wrong direction, right? But their spin in a country like a Russia is the US is the enemy. And so why is it that, theirs is propaganda, but what they say in the US about Russia or anywhere else is not? I mean, it's kind of like I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and so therefore the Indians are the team that you root for in baseball or whatever they're changing their name to now. I don't even know, but I guess they're changing their name. But you know, why is it that because I'm from Cleveland, I have to root for the Indians? Why don't you root for the winner? Why don't you go and be on the winning team and make yourself a winner in the process? And I think so many people's identity is wrapped up in, I'm a loser if my country sucks. Chances are your country does suck. And you can create your own identity by being a success on your own and not relying on an identity based on where you were born.
I really love that sentence. My last question is, how could people work with you if some of our audience are interested in having multiple citizenships, reducing their income tax?
I think the first thing to do is, we have a YouTube channel. I've got about 1,100 videos right now where you can go and watch and you can learn. We've got a blog, nomadcapitalist.com. We've got almost 2,000 articles, and we keep them as up to date as anyone can keep 2,000 articles up to date. I also wrote a book called Nomad Capitalist. It's on Amazon. Whichever style suits you best. The book certainly is a little bit more story-based and less how-to, but at least you get the idea of what's possible. The most successful people start with doing one of those things to get the vibe, right? Because you're not going to reduce your taxes and just stay living in Abilene, Texas. You can't set up a Belize company and run your business in Texas through the Belize company and not pay tax. It's not that simple. So I want people to understand what's possible, what's not possible. They can do it for free or $10 in the case of the book. And after that, I think this year we're basically accepting about 12 or 13 people a month. I have a team of about 30 people. I work pretty closely with about 5 of them to help create plans for people. And then we've got a team of about 12, 13 people who execute those plans. It's a 2-part process. And so, for me, it's strategizing first. It's looking at all the options. It's, if I'm a US citizen, how does my investment over here affect my US taxes? Because the guy over there has no idea how US taxes works. The guy in Panama has no idea how your banking in Malaysia works. And so we kind of work to put the pieces together and help people. But obviously, because it is a boutique service, it is not something that we churn out like widgets. And so people can go to nomadcapitalist.com. They can click on the button to become a client. And we've got an application process. We're looking for people who are nice. I've been doing this a long time. No, in all seriousns, right? I got something the other day from a guy. He's like, "You're like a big jerk. Why don't you want to work with me?" It's like, I think you figured it out, right? I had successful businesses in the US. I have a very successful business now. I don't need to collect someone's $18,000 to be miserable for a month. I just don't need it. But, we're looking for nice people who we can get an ROI for, which is why we say 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs, people who, can afford to do this properly and not cut any corners. And so, go to nomadcapitalist.com and fill out the application. And it'll help us determine, if we can help you. And if we can help you, then we don't want to, take your money. Maybe we can point you in a better direction. But that's what it is. And so, it's boutique, it's custom, it's personalized. It's, I think from years of experience, this is one thing that people don't always want to hear. It's human. I'll make videos sometimes where I'll talk about, let me just share my feelings on something. And people say, no, more ideas about passports. Which passport can I get? I said, listen, you're never going to get the passport. You're never going to fully do this if you don't understand that there are human wants, needs, and desires behind the scenes that people don't want to talk about because it's emotional and they think it's all about strategy. This is entirely about emotions. And so I think we try and touch on the human element where we try and speak to people's fears. We try and soothe, ease the process for people in a way that maybe an accountant who just wants to reduce your taxes by every percentage point possible won't, right? Most people would rather pay 5% to live in Portugal than 2% to live in Belarus.
Yeah.
Right. But if you call KPMG, and I've had many people who've gone to the big four and they come back very unhappy. They say, oh, they just told me I can move to Switzerland or I can, move to Dubai or I can, I don't want to do that. Right. So there has to be a human element to going offshore. What is it you're willing to do? What is it you're not willing to do? I think that's part of what as hopefully an intuitive person and someone who's done this and who has, seen the frustrations can help people avoid.
Yeah. And for majority of people, if they're not ready to apply to be your clients, they can also go to your website, go to your YouTube channel. There are a lot of free content there, and they're very helpful.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, we've been writing articles for 8 years. I've been making videos for most of that time. We put out a new video every day. I'm on, great shows like yours. People can hear other opinions. This is for me. This is kind of like a little bit like open mic night at the comedy club. I get to try out some new material sometimes, or explaining things in different ways. And there's a lot of content out there. I think people can do it how they want, and they can take it as far as they want. But certainly happy to help people, and really proud that we've helped a lot of people.
I have observed that people born in the late 80s till 90s, they are looking for a global lifestyle, location independent. They are not so patriotic. They just want flexibility and freedom. I see a really upcoming trend. There's a huge demand among millennials.
And I hope it stays that way. I do hear from a lot of folks who say, we're going to do this for 5 years and then we're going to move back to Australia and have kids, and we want them to go to the same schools. They have schools in Singapore. They have schools in Switzerland. They have schools pretty much everywhere, quite frankly.
Yep.
I remember when I was in Southeast Asia doing a long tour, spending a month in each place, one thing I did in every country was I went to a school, and I talked to, the teachers who were from Western countries, and they taught students of diplomats and things like that. Nobody thinks that if you're the son of an ambassador, you're going to come back some stooge. I mean, you might be a stooge because you were raised by an ambassador who works 11 hours a week, but it's not because you went to a bad school. I remember being in Laos and, seeing the school. And I'm like, okay, this is, they're following the international curriculum. This is not so bad. And so I hope that continues. I'm glad to see that we have this more open mindset. But I think that the two things to keep in mind are, obviously, countries are cracking down on that. You want to make sure you're in tax compliance with the country where you're leaving. And hopefully you keep that mindset open, beyond just 5 years as an adventure, and realize that, you can do this as a way of life. I need to seek special permission if I want to go back just to visit the US, let alone live there. I am locked in for the next 50 years, God willing, of being a global citizen. And it doesn't daunt me at all.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing your perspective on being a global citizen. I hope this content can inspire some of our audience to look at their citizenship or their mobility in a different angle. And like you said, the world is your buffet. So thank you again, and hope to see you around. I hope you enjoyed today's content. Before letting you go, I have very exciting news to share with you. I am collaborating with financial Imagineer, Matthias Richter, to introduce you the Fast Track Money course. This 6-week online course is designed to help young professionals in their 20s to 40s to learn how to save more, earn more, and invest, using money as a tool to fulfill your dreams. We teach you the proven method that Matthias has been using himself in the last 20 years and achieved financial independence. If he can do it, so can you. Sign up for interest on fasttrack.life/money course to receive the latest course updates and promotions. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Fast Track Podcast. Show me your support by liking this episode and sharing it with a friend. Join the Facebook group at Fast Track Podcast 1, or you can find us on Instagram, YouTube, and of course the homepage fasttrack.life. See you in the next episode.